And welcome, everybody. Hands-on Apologetics. You have entered into Virgin Most Powerful Apologetics Dojo. And welcome back, everybody. Hands-on Apologetics. And we're going to talk about a distinctively Catholic understanding, namely transubstantiation. That's that mysterious change that bread and wine undergo in the consecration during the Mass, in which they become the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Christ under the appearances of bread and wine. It's a fancy, technical, philosophical term, but is it biblical? Is it rooted in church history, or is this something that was made up in the Middle Ages? Well, our good friend William Albrecht is on the air, and he's going to help work us through the evidence for transubstantiation. William, of course, is a convert to the faith. He's an international speaker and debater. He's participated in over 50 live and moderated debates. William runs a website dedicated to the early church fathers, which is patristicpillars.com. Check it out, folks. And William Albrecht, welcome back to Hands-On Apologetics.
Gary, my dear friend, it is always incredible fun being on.
Yeah, I tell you, the dojo lights up when you're here to throw down some information. So,
it's so much fun.
Yeah, and you picked a very interesting topic, transubstantiation. I would venture to say, William, I don't know if I would say most, but I would even say a lot of Catholics probably aren't even familiar with the term transubstantiation. What is it?
You're correct, Gary. A lot of people may really not know what the term is, and it's a very important and crucial term that you must know when you partake of the Holy Eucharist. Well, I always like to go to the Catholic Encyclopedia, Gary. It gives a really good description. It says that it is a transition of the entire substance of the bread and wine into the body and blood of Christ. That is the express doctrine of the Church as declared at the Great Council of Trent. So what are we talking about when we say transubstantiation? Really, Gary, you brought up a great point. And we read of it in Pope Pius XII, who in the 1950s, we frequently, as Catholics, we get attacked on the term by Protestants will say, you guys are relying on an ancient term that arose in the Middle Ages to talk about the change that occurs in the Eucharist. No, that is not. Catholic doctrine does not hinge upon a concept that developed in the Middle Ages. As Pope Pius XII said in Humani Generis, he reiterated the teaching that underlying transubstantiation, the very teaching, the fact that the bread and the wine become the actual body and blood of Christ, that truth does not hinge upon an Aristotelian concept. It doesn't. It is clear that this teaching, using this term, is a great term in which the Church can utilize to describe the great sacrament of the Holy Eucharist. Thus it is employed. So what do we mean, Gary? We mean that the bread and the wine become the actual body and blood of Christ in all his glorified divinity, as you said. And that, as you know, Gary, has been a teaching from the very beginning.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, that's great that you brought that up, because that's such an important point. The doctrine of transubstantiation doesn't come from Aristotle, but rather the Church is using terminology of Aristotelian philosophy to explain, add clarity in the explanation of what we mean by this great mystery of Christ's presence under the appearance of bread and wine. That's a really
definitely. Yeah, it's a very important point. I'm glad that you emphasized that as well, Gary, because we tend to forget when we go to Mass, we tend to forget the incredible thing that is occurring right before our very eyes. And there's another element of transubstantiation that frequently you may have people that will tell you, okay, well, I know what the Church is talking about when they talk about it, but then they forget the other important element, the fact that our Holy Mass is a sacrifice. It is considered a sacrifice, and that seems to be forgotten. But really, if we look as early as the Old Testament, we have the foreshadowing of that incredible sacrifice that is happening there before our very eyes at our Holy Mass.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's also not only Catholics don't really understand what transubstantiation is, but also forget about the sacrificial aspect too. That's a really good point.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. And people frequently will tell you, well, where are you getting the idea of the bread and wine being a sacrifice? And I always like to start off early, and you can get earlier in the book of Genesis, Gary. And if we go to Genesis 14, I mean, we get such an incredible image. First off, Genesis 14:18, we read, "And King Melchizedek of Salem brought out bread and wine. He was a priest of God Most High. He blessed him and said, 'Blessed be Abram by God Most High, maker of heaven and earth, and blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hand.'" Well, we'll unpack that in a bit. I want to hop on over to Malachi 1. Malachi 1:11 says, "For from the rising of the sun to its setting, my name is great among the nations, and in every place incense is offered to my name, and a pure offering." We have two things that right away shoot out at us, Gary. That is Melchizedek, which, by the way, he appears and then disappears. We don't really know a whole lot about the character of Melchizedek, other than the fact that he brought out bread and wine. But then here's the incredible thing, Gary. He brought out bread and wine. We read that he was a priest of God Most High, and he blessed him and said, "Blessed be Abraham." Well, correct me if I'm wrong, Gary, but what is it that priests do? They offer sacrifice, don't they?
Yeah.
Well, King Melchizedek brought out the bread and wine, and that was a sacrifice that was offered. Now, for the audience that are tuning in, we don't want to cause confusion and say, well, did the bread and wine become the body and blood of Christ there? No. But this is an incredible foreshadowing. You have a King Melchizedek who brings out bread and wine, and he is Hideus. He is priest of God Most High, and he offers the bread and the wine as a sacrifice. How does this connect with Malachi 1? Well, correct me if I'm wrong, Gary, but when anybody approaches me and says, where is this location where there is every place that a pure offering is being offered, pure incense and a pure sacrifice, and we can point them to the Catholic Church, where everywhere in the world, the Greek word Katholikos, which means universal, everywhere in the world, from the rising of the sun to the setting, the name of the Lord God is great, and there is offered a pure sacrifice. And that pure sacrifice is the Eucharist.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, you have to wonder, is this a false prophecy? If there is no sacrifice, after the cross, then then what was Malachi 1:11 all about?
Yeah, no doubt, Gary. And then really another incredible element is